All right, Harry. First Samuel chapter 17, right? The famous story of David and Goliath. Almost everybody's heard about it. But was David expecting this when he woke up that day, or was he anticipating to fight Goliath that day?
No, no, not at all. So let's start with the story. In verse 12, we learn that a man from Bethlehem has 8 sons. The 3 oldest were with Israel and with Saul the king in Israel's army, about 25 kilometers to the west. And David was the youngest of 8 boys. But David took his job was taking care of his father's sheep. Verse 17, Jesse the father sends David to bring food to the 3 brothers in the army and some cheese to the commander. Then see how they're doing and give me a report. Verse 20, David loaded up early in the morning and headed out. Got there just as the army was getting in position, posturing. David ran to the front lines and greeted his brothers. Verse 23, as he was chatting to them, this 9-foot tall enemy warrior came out and taunted the Israel army and God. And this was day number 40. Verse 26, David says, who is this Philistine that he should defy the armies of the living God? He was really offended by that.
Mhm.
So verse 32 to 37, do you mind reading those?
Yeah, for sure. It says, David said to Saul, let no one lose heart on account of this Philistine. Your servant will go and fight him. Saul replied, you are not able to go out against the Philistine and fight him. You are only a young man, and he has been a warrior from his youth. But David said to Saul, your servant has been keeping his father's sheep. When a lion or a bear came and carried off a sheep from the flock, I went after it, struck it, and rescued the sheep from its mouth. When it turned on me, I seized it by its hair and struck it and killed it. Your servant has killed both the lion and the bear. This uncircumcised Philistine will be like one of them, because he has defiled the armies of the living God. The Lord who rescued me from the paw of the lion and the paw of the bear will rescue me from the hand of the Philistine.
Yeah, and it's really interesting. So David's experience with the lion and the bear gave him the confidence he needed for this occasion, because David's faith in God was experiential. He had
Hey, he's been
experienced God.
grooming at this part in his whole life, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And David didn't really think about that, but David just wasn't having it. The lion and the bear were going to steal a sheep. And and God rescued him, and he's thanking God for that. And this Philistine's not an issue. So let's read the next section, 40 to 51.
Okay, it says, then he took his staff in his hand, chose 5 smooth stones from the stream, put them in the pouch of his shepherd's bag, and with his sling in his hand approached the Philistine. Meanwhile, the Philistine with his shield bearer in front of him kept coming closer to David. He looked David over and saw that he was little more than a boy, glowing in health and handsome, and he despised him. He said to David, am I a dog that you come at me with sticks? And the Philistine cursed David by his gods. Come here, he said, and I'll give your flesh to the birds and wild animals. David said to the Philistine, you come against me with sword and spear and javelin, but I come against you in the name of the Lord Almighty, the God of the armies of Israel, whom you have defiled. This day the Lord will deliver you into my hands, and I'll strike you down and cut off your head. This very day I will give the carcasses of the Philistines' army to the birds and the wild animals, and the whole world will know that there is a God in Israel. All those gathered here will know that it is not by sword or spear that the Lord saves, for the battle is the Lord's, and he will give all of you into our hands. As the Philistines moved closer to attack him, David ran quickly toward the battle line to meet him. Reaching into his bag and taking out a stone, he slung it and struck the Philistine on the forehead. The stone sank into his forehead, and he fell face down on the ground. So David triumphed over the Philistine with a sling and a stone. Without a sword in his hand, he struck down the Philistine and killed him. David ran and stood over him. He took hold of the Philistine's sword and drew it from his sheath. After he killed him, he cut off his head with the sword. When the Philistines saw that their hero was dead, they turned and ran.
Yeah, if you think about it, a man the size of Goliath, he had a big forehead. So David saw the target. God gave him the sight to know that, to recognize that, and Goliath even provided the sword that he needed to finish him off. It was all David had to do. Well, not say all. I don't mean that in a light way, but David didn't have to provide a lot of stuff. a slingshot and a stone. And this is normal stuff for David. He just did his normal daily duty and dealt with the problem.
Yeah, he
I
had to
had a
make himself available, right?
That's right. That's right. But David was there. He never even so did David know that morning what would happen that day?
No, he had no clue. His job was to go there and give lunch to his brothers.
Yeah. Did God know that morning what would happen this day?
Yes, exactly. God has definitely knew what he was getting David into.
Yeah, it was day 40. It was the full number. It was time to deal with Goliath. God knew, so he incited David's father to send David there. And what was David's role? He was just faithful. He just
Mhm.
did what was coming. David didn't have to plan this. And as we read all the heroes of faith, none of them planned it. It was God's plan. They just fit in. And that's really our opportunity too. If we can just kind of be available, not kind of, if we can be available, the answer is yes, whatever comes our way. And I know that's not easy. I know I messed up today on a small item, but it was just really frustrating when I missed the opportunity. It was, yeah, no big deal in a sense, but I missed it. And that
Mhm.
really annoyed me. That really ground on me. I hope I don't do that too often, and the thing is, the opportunities come, but we have to pay attention. And yeah, that's our job. The answer is yes. What do you have for me?
And thanks a lot for this, Harry.
Thank you.